Welcome back to another video. This video is actually a continuation of the previous video where we studied the combined framework. The previous video was just an introduction to the combined framework, but in this video we are going to further explore how we can use combine to maybe fetch data from a network. So I have this very simple JSON in here, a request. It's a JSON placeholder API. You can use any other API if you have, but I'm going to stick with this one. So it's written as an array, and then within this array we have this JSON object, and then within this JSON object we have different properties. So yeah, and so let's just grab this API, and then we can go to our Xcode, and inside our combined data service I'm going to create another method in here that maybe says fetch users, and yeah, and then we can just create a constant in here, maybe API equals to this, and then we can create our struct that says maybe user model, because we are going to get the user from this API. So maybe we can utilize ID, and then maybe a name of with each user we have a name, and then we have this username as well, and yeah, we have maybe this website, and then we have this further like an address and company, but it's a further struct, so you have to like do this, maybe yeah, user address or something, and then like we have this street in here, which is of type string. So you can just, it's just a demonstration on how you can utilize this. So now we need to use address, and it is of type user address, and that's it. This is how our structs looks like, and we can just maybe close this one now. And yeah, and the next thing we need to do is we need to get a URL. So we can create URL from this URL, and we can provide a string. So this is, initializer, and it accepts a string, and then we can just pass it a string, and then we can use this you can use a guard or a flat statement if you want, but I'm just going to force it, so that forced unwrapping, because if by default it will be nullable, but we want it to be non-nullable, so just make sure that it's not null. And then we can use, we already know that we have different inbuilt publishers that we can use. So we have this URL session publisher at that as well, that's takes data from the URL. So we can use this one, URL session dot shared dot data task publisher for URL. And yeah, now if you want, you can check the return type, or what this is going to return. It actually return as this data task publisher. So next what we can do is use operator with this publisher. So we can use in here a map operator, and you can see that with this we get this data and response from this data task publisher. So we are actually interested in the data only. So what we can do is we can only maybe use data from here, .0 data. And now if you check this type for this temp, you can see that we have now a data a publisher. Further it has a type of data, and then further what we can do is we can now use another operator. It's called decode. So now we can decode this data that we have in here. So first we need to provide the type. So for the type, we first have to make sure that we are conforming to decodable protocol, and also for this type, because this is utilized in here, so it has to conform to decodable as well. And now what we can do is we can, because we know that this will be a list of users, so we can use list in here, and then we can use dot self, and for the decoder we can use JSON decoder. And yeah, just like that we have decoded. And now if we check this, so we have this down somewhere a user model. So what we can do next is now we can just simply return this and use dot erase to any publisher. So in here we can use now any publisher, because you know this it has, you know, a lot of it had a very complex type. If I can show you again, so if you do not use this erase to any publisher, this is a very complex type to, you know, write in the return. So we have to write it like this, but we do not want this complex type, so instead we can just simply return this and use this erase to any publisher. And then within this any publisher, because we know that we are going to get a list of user model from here, and then error if something went wrong. So now we have our method. This is completed, and we can go to our view model, and in here maybe on init, in the init we can use this service dot fetch users, and then we first have to, because this is an API call, so we need to change the thread in here, so we can use dot receive on dispatch queue dot main. So we want to receive this on a main thread, and then we can use this sync, and we have this completion, so we also want to use completion this time, and we can use a switch on the completion, and then we can use case dot finished, and we can just print finished, maybe fetching users. And then we need we have another case that's failure, so we can use error from here. If something went wrong, we can print fetching users error or something, and then we can display the error. And if we have received users, so what we can do is maybe have another published variable in here that says maybe users, it's of type user model, and by default it's empty. So what we can do is self.users equals to users. And yeah, and next we also have to store this, so we can store this in cancellables. And next in the view we actually need to use a state object in here, so to let the view know that it has to observe for the changes in this view model. And we can actually in some tutorials you may see that we are using this observed object in here as well. There is a difference between observed object and state object. I will actually create maybe a separate video or maybe an article, but I will let you guys know that once the article or the video is ready. There is a difference between them, and when to use which of these, when to use the observed object and when to use a state object. So now instead of only text in here, what we can do is we can use for each, and we can use view model dot users, and for the ID we actually have the ID, so we can use the ID in here, and then we can simply write text that actually displays the maybe username. Yeah, I think that's enough. And now we can run our app and see if our network request is working fine. So that's it. So this looks great. Our API is working fine. You can change the view if you want. You can use any other view, but this is just demonstration, so I'm just going to keep it like this. And yeah, And if you want, you can actually make this method generic. So instead of fetch user, you can simply maybe call this as fetch, and then you can let's just first complete the method, and then I will let you know how we can update this to more generic version. So any publisher, and yeah, and now instead of fetching only the users, what we can do is we can mention that we can fetch any type, or we can decode, any type that conforms to decodable. So in here it's going to return you the type T and error. And now we can just copy this thing and paste it in here. So instead of decoding to user model, now it will be decoding T, because this T actually conforms to decodable. So this is more generic version of this method. So only thing you have to do this, you can use maybe enums or something. You have to change the APIs, like this is always going to return you the user, but let's just say if you want to return maybe the want to get the pictures, comments, or posts, so that's a different API, so you have to change this as well. We can use enum or something like that. And now instead of so now what we can do is we can use this in two ways. Like we can use this as request, and then we can mention that we want any publisher of type maybe user model, and then error, and then we can use service dot fetch, and it will satisfy the conditions. And then further you can use request dot sync something, or you can use directly like this, service dot fetch as any publisher, and then in here you can mention that you want to fetch the user model, and yeah, so and then you can use sync, so it's the same thing. So that's it for this video. I hope it was easy to understand, but just to let you know that how we can use combine to actually fetch data from server. So it's complaining, so I'm just going to comment this out as whole. So yeah, and we actually have nowadays a more better way to fetch data from network, and this is by utilizing the Async-Await. I'm going to create videos on how you can use Async-Await, but if there is if the combine is it's also combined, there is a framework combined, and you may have a requirement to use combine only, so you should know that how, at least some basic understanding of combine, that how we can use combine. Of course in the future is you may have to work with only async-await, because it's much better way to write network request. But it was just to let you know that how you can actually work with a combine. So if you have anything, let me know in the comment, and I will see you in the next video.